Welcome to the Audacious Living Podcast, hosted by my man, Audley Stevenson, the Odd Man. He'll unpack wisdom and insights from a cross-section of top quality performers in business, media, sports, entertainment, and lifestyle to uncover key elements to help you live your best audacious life ever. So without further ado, here is the Odd Man.
Greetings and salutations. What's happening, everybody? I'm Audley Stevenson, and welcome to the most audacious podcast the internet has to offer, hands down. This is the Audacious Living Podcast, and we're appreciative, as always, that you've taken the time out of your day and have chosen to spend it here with us as we continue our ongoing goal of helping our listeners live their best audacious life ever. As always, I encourage you to connect with us through our social media channels. Under our Twitter and Instagram handle is the Audacious Pod, and then on Facebook is the Audacious Living Podcast. So please connect with us, like, follow, subscribe, share, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and immediately be in the know every time there's new video content that comes out. So I think that's a great way to keep that conversation going. Speaking of conversation, the topic of conversation on this week's podcast is all about courage. We're going to spend some time defining it, dissecting it, and understanding it with the full intent of helping listeners recognize what needs to be done for us to all tap into that inner courage that exists within inside all of us. I think of the cowardly lion from the Wizard of Oz. The courage was always there. He just needed a way to tap into it. One of the ways that we're going to tap into that courage that exists within us is some assistance from Sandra Walston. She is an expert, a courage expert to be exact, and for over 25 years, she's helped individuals and organizations deepen their understanding of what it means to be courageous and the things that we can do to unlock that inner courageousness that lives inside all of us. You know, when it comes to courage, it really is never too late to start living a courageous life. In fact, courage is simply just another trait that can be developed with a little bit of intentional effort and practice, like anything else. All it takes is determination to recognize that the fears and the things that are holding us back, we're not going to let that stop us, and we have a willingness to choose to act in spite of those things, those self-doubts, those fears, those uncertainties. We get into all of this and so much more. I really, really enjoyed my chat with Sandra on what I consider a very, very important topic, and I'm certain that all of you will enjoy it too. So without any further ado, here's my conversation with Sandra Walston. Enjoy. It's great to be here back on the Audacious Living Podcast, and I am thrilled, excited, and happy to be joined by Sandra Walston, the courage expert, to have looking for a great conversation about the topic of courage and the significance in our lives and how we can develop it as individuals. So Sandra, it's a pleasure to be here with you today.
Thank you. I've been looking forward to this.
Yes, absolutely. I have as well, and I think when you have the title, the courage expert, it says there's a lot to be learned from you. So I'm really looking forward to our chat today.
Well, don't get too carried away. I mean, 26 years of research that yielded 3 books. I mean, come on, give me a break. Maybe I know a couple of things.
Sure. That's okay. We'll start. How about we start there with a couple things and see where it goes? Is that okay?
All right, I'm with you.
But yeah, I mean, listen, the topic of courage is a big one. It's one of those things that people kind of understand. I think everyone knows the word, obviously, but I wonder how much of a true understanding of what courage is. So I wonder, maybe as a starting point, we can start talking about the definition of what courage is.
Yay! Somebody that's right on target, a bullseye. Yes. Okay. Yes, that's the critical foundation, Audley, is my mission is to awaken people to the etymology of the word courage, which is medieval Old French courage, meaning heart and spirit, or in Latin cor, C-O-R, meaning heart. So how do you
Sorry, courage. Did you say it again? Courage? That's
courage, C-O-R-A-G-E,
yeah.
medieval Old French.
I love the way it
Courage.
sounds.
So
Courage.
courage. Yes.
I love
We're looking good already.
that. We're working on our linguistics already. That wasn't even part of the plan, but we're into it.
Oh, that's so funny you say the word linguistics, because that's part of I'm a certified coach, and linguistics is a big part of that.
Yeah.
And I wrote an article called The Language of Courage. But anyway, let's go back to an awakened heart, or a conscious heart. So, I've read research from some of the major universities that says some of the most important leadership skill is courage. But what is it, like you said? So, courage is coming from your heart. So what would be an example of that? Well, every time you swallow your voice and then regret it, because you don't have the linguistic skills in which to be able to say, okay, I see a red flag here. What do I need to do? How can I say what I need to say? Instead, you've got all this chatter going on in your head, undermining who you are and what you need to say.
Right. So our voice is a big part of courage, and finding and maintaining it really is what you're saying.
Yes, and that's kind of interesting, because out of 26 years of research, it's only in the last 5 years, the research is developed like confirmed, validated, but most recent of the last 5 or 6 years has been speaking up, and how people will say of all walks of life, Sandra, I just don't have the linguistic skills like you do in which to not swallow my voice. So the first I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, so the confidence really, because I've always thought and I truly believe that although the people who doubt ourselves or question, that it is there, they just don't believe it's there.
Oh yeah, there's that confidence element, definitely. So beginning to write, usually there's some consistent chatter that's going on in the head about, well, I'm going to look stupid if I speak up. Well, what if I say this wrong? Well, what if somebody says, oh, you're full of it? Well, what is going to happen as compared to being able to stand centered in your reservoir of courage to know how to speak up. So I'll give you an example. When I'll pretend like I'm in a sales meeting. So if I catch myself going, oh, they're going to think I'm stupid. What do I really know? We've already talked about, whatever the demeaning, suffering chatter is that we all do. I will say this. So pretend like I'm in a meeting. This takes a lot of courage for me to share blah, blah, blah. I put the cards on the table.
Yeah.
And when that happens, it's like a different kind of listening shows up. It's like everybody perks up, their ears are up, and they're like, wow, this is a big deal for her. Let's listen.
Yeah. That's a great strategy, I think. And I think also too, what could happen is because people can relate to it, right? We've all been in situations where we've had to speak up and maybe there was confidence issues. But I think when you say something like that, you get people's attention and they can connect with you a bit better.
Absolutely. It's just amazing. It's like I can literally see their ears kind of perk up.
Yeah.
Like, oh, okay. So there's more respect there, instead of saying, well, I think we ought to do blah, blah, blah. Like, that's dead linguistics.
Yeah.
So, speaking up is a big one.
It reminds me, I used to have a strategy. So once upon a time, long time ago in a galaxy far away, I used to be very conscious about speaking up. And what my issue is that I just had this fear that people wouldn't understand me. And I'd say something and they'd look at me with this deadpan look in my face because they didn't know what I was saying and I wasn't coming across clearly. And it really became, Sandra, a real concern or fear for me. So much so that I used to not speak. I thought maybe it's just better I don't say anything because that way I won't mess it up. And that way I won't have to be worried about not being misunderstood. And, you can't stay quiet forever. And I realized that I needed to speak up. And the strategy that I developed is I would do a check-in. So I would say something and say, does that make sense to you? Do you understand that? Does that, and that gave me, so when I got the affirming, oh yeah, keep going, that helped develop my confidence. And it was funny that I remember, and even I do it so often, like even to this day, I find myself saying something and checking in. Hey, does that make sense with you? Mind you, I'm doing it more habitually, whereas that time I was doing it out of a strategy to help myself. So I thought that story when you shared that example.
Yeah, look at the suffering that you were going through,
Oh my
by
goodness.
just the chatter of all of that and the suffering of that. I want to go back a little bit to the definition of courage just to make sure that it
Hmm.
gets so commingled with bravery and
Hmm.
it gets commingled with fear. So, most cultures sell fear beautifully. Everything is around fear, fear, fear. So I don't sell,
Yes. And there's
I don't
lots of
sell.
it.
So the fear is an example you just gave about all the chatter. I'm going to look stupid. I'm just going to, I don't want my image to look bad. So I'm just not going to talk.
Right.
That
Right.
way I don't have to put myself at risk.
That's right.
But the courage of heart and spirit and building a reservoir of courage is not about bravery. Bravery, and men tend to relate to bravery. Bravery is more valor and there I am. I was at the gym this morning. Look at how strong I am.
Right. Right.
you know, so bravery, and then the duality of courage and fear. So I don't write about fear or talk about fear except for the suffering that we do of the chatter as compared to being able to recognize the first red flags.
Yeah, and thank you for making that distinction, because I think you are right. They're all sort of mixed together, especially the courage and bravery component. And in fact, they're
Oh,
they're 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 actually one and the same, I think, for a lot of people.
yes, and I need to stop that. So I'm here to say, no, stop that. Courage and bravery are not synonymous terms. Bravery is physical courage. Now, with regards to courage, most cultures do correlate courage with physical courage. So my research revealed that there are facets of courage. So there's physical courage, spiritual courage, leadership courage, on and on. But I don't do anything around the physical courage because that's the hero. That's
Right.
being a heroic. So we'll say, well, I haven't done anything heroic. I haven't done anything. Well, you've just discounted the stepping stones in your life. So I'll
Mm,
ask people,
that's
I'll,
true.
I'll ask people, so what was the most courageous step you ever took in your work life? Or you can make it your personal life. Everybody comes up with one. What would be yours, Audley? What would be the most?
I mean, starting this podcast as an example,
Yeah,
in fact, I remember, so I started this podcast in December of 2020. It was to sort of fill a void because COVID left us with a lot less to do. And the pandemic sort of, left people sort of there.
stranded.
And when I started the podcast, I remember the chat. So you talk about the chatter. Here's another example of
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
The very first thing I remember the chatter being, there's lots of podcasts already. There's lots of people out there already doing that. Like everyone's already talking. You're just going to clutter the areas and just create more, noise like everyone else. Why would you do that? Right? That was a chatter, right? So, it was getting past that, and I like the fact that you made a point about discounting the stepping stones that we in our lives, because it's important. I believe it's important that we recognize those steps, those markers, those milestones, because that sets you up for future jumps or future leaps that you want to make.
Oh, so true. You speak the language of courage beautifully. Your insights are just so bullseye.
Oh,
I'm kind of like wow, this dude really gets it.
oh, thank you. Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Because yeah, I mean, so I mean, it's even as simple as giving someone a compliment.
Yeah.
Like they'll be telling a story of courage and it'll correlate, and I'll go, wow, I really admire your courage, and
Yeah.
they'll be like, oh, I just did what I had to do.
Yep. Yep.
I'm, I,
Even in that example, Sandra, I'm glad that's a great example that you brought, because they themselves aren't recognizing that, that act of courage, right? And so sometimes when it's pointed out, we can point it out to one another. We're sort of, I'm gonna say inspire, but boosting ourselves and creating those stepping stones for other people.
Well, in the example I was giving, they discounted. They said, "Oh no, I just did what I
Yes.
had to do."
Mhm.
So being at times, I love being a jerk at times. Let me just confess. When an opportunity comes up to be a jerk, I'll take it. So
I love it.
I'll say, you just discounted my compliment, so that they know, hey, you this was courage. So when I ask people, what was the most courageous step you ever took in your work life or your personal life? Everybody comes up with one. So why would you discount all of the other ones that maybe was an illness or graduating or whatever the stepping stones may be?
Yeah.
Because they are every day. It's not about at the end of your life. Oh, well, Audrey did blah, 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 there he is. Let's look at his epitaph. No, it's now. It's being in the present now and encourage your heart.
I wonder if part of the reason is that people don't truly understand the definition of courage.
Absolutely.
Right? Is that where you think that's where it comes from?
That's the breakdown. The breakdown is that, we focus on physical courage. How about this? Let's see if I can say this in one breath. The sensational, the amazing, the tragic, the scandalous, or glamorizing the superficial. Woo!
That's a mouthful.
So, we look at courage and bravery as a duality, commingling it as synonymous, not. We look at courage and fear as being the key thing. You got to have fear, not. Churchill said something to his people about a lady said, you gave people courage. And he said, no, I showed them their courage.
That's powerful.
Yeah.
That's powerful.
So I'm an 11th hour hospice volunteer, which means I sit with people who are getting the last breath.
Mm-hmm.
And you do not want to be sitting with resentment, anger,
right,
misgivings. You want to be in your true self. You want to have no regrets. You want to know that you lived in courage.
Right.
When my time comes to pass on, I will have no regrets. I will be okay. It's my time. It's my time.
Yep. No, that's amazing. And
so you make courage your daily legacy.
Mm-hmm.
Daily, not your epitaph at the end of your life. Like, dang it, why didn't I do that? Why didn't I have that conversation?
Yeah. No, and that's a great reminder that it's first of all, it's all within us, and I can't help but think about the lion from the Wizard of Oz, right? He always had it inside of him. It just needed to be awakened. Sort of speaking to the Churchill quote that you referenced.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I always talk about the cowardly lion. He always had it. It's just that the fear was. Well, it's hard because our cultures sell fear, I mean, so it's a hard one to overcome, but also the heroic, well, I haven't saved a drowning child. I haven't done anything. Right. Who am I? I'm a nobody. Well, I've stepped up every day in my last 26 years to sell courage so that people know that it is a tool, a virtue. What Aristotle says, the most important virtue, making all of the virtues possible.
Yeah, that's another great quote. I wonder, Sandra, if you could talk a little bit about and you've referenced a couple times now, the significance of the heart, and as in relation to courage. I want you to expand on that a bit more, because as we talked about the definition of courage not being clear to everyone, I don't know if everyone necessarily sees that connection to the heart and spirit to courage either.
Well, that it is the etymology of the word courage. So if we look it up on Google, probably it would say something about perseverance. But there's actually an organization, and I don't have my notes out to look, but it's called heartmath.org.
Okay.
And when I'm doing presentations, I have their work that how the heart is the most powerful, and I don't want to misquote here, I'm just going to say the most powerful organ or whatever that we have. I mean, you figure it's your first breath and it's your last breath.
Right.
So there is a reservoir of courage that in our heart that we build from. So for example, heart sayings, I just had to do what was right for my heart. I wore my heart on my sleeve. If you think of one of those heart sayings, just think of one that you may say, then that means you're coming from your courage.
Right. Yeah. There's a lot. Actually, as you say that, there are a lot of those heart sayings, and there's a lot of sayings that are connected to the heart, and that's actually a really good point in terms of that connection to courage.
Yeah. So I wore my heart on my sleeves.
Yeah.
So anytime and I've got a long list of heart sayings that I do in my programs, and anytime we say that's validating that you are being true to yourself, true to yourself, not your false truth, not all that chatter, the false self,
Yes.
but you're being true to yourself when you say that. I'm trying to think of one more. Is there one that you would say?
Put heart in it. I kind of, that one, people say, put some heart into it. And I'm trying to think of
Yeah.
it.
So
Yeah,
put some heart into it. I mean,
yeah,
drum up your courage, step up.
yeah, yeah. There's a direct connection, Sandra. Absolutely. I can see that clear as day. Absolutely.
I wore my heart on my sleeves.
Yeah. It's all about the heart. All about the heart. And now, so when we talk about the spirit, then how can you sort of touch on that piece too? Then.
Well, I mean, for some, like in Latin, cor, C-O-R,
Mm-hmm.
it's just heart. So heart and spirit to me is where your spirit actually connects with your heart to know how you're creating your journey. So.
Got you. The core piece.
Pardon?
No, the core. You talk about the core, and it's very much connected to the core.
Exactly.
Yeah. Got you. So people may be listening to this conversation, Sandra, and it's great. I really appreciate the points you've raised us for. I think for a lot of people, so the next steps are okay. So what does that look like? That process look like to developing my own courage? I think a big part of it is we defined it, and part of that definition is that sort of realization, because now you realize it's in you. I guess the next step is opening it up, and what does that look like, or that process look like?
When you say opening it up, well, one of the things that, if I'm understanding what you're asking, one of the things is to begin to recognize why you swallow your voice. What is that consistent chatter? Generally, oddly, it's from something that happened to us when our wings were clipped from 0 to 7. Right. And we lost our spirit, our true self, our heart and spirit, and we had to adapt to whatever that was, our environment or whatever. And so our wings were clipped. And so we carry those stories with us along our way, generally unbeknownst to us, that chatter. So like for you wanted to keep your image pure by saying, if I just don't speak up, if I just don't say anything, I'll look good here. Right. I'll keep my image up.
Right.
So beginning to recognize what is that chatter and what is the story that's underneath there. Now, one of the ways that can do it, and you see it in movies, is the actor will be going through something, usually pretty serious, and they'll have a flashback to when they were at that age.
Yes.
5, 6, 7, and they'll see themselves, why that false true story that when their wings were clipped came into that. Right. So if we can get that level of courage consciousness where we see, okay, I see in my childhood where that happened, where my wings were clipped, then I can remedy that and no longer swallow my voice. Or how about this one? Sell my soul.
That's another one. That's another good one. That's another good one. I think that I'm very glad that you referenced that 0 to 7 age and how really identifying how critical that is to set up ourselves for the rest of our lives. And we oftentimes hear so much of so much can be turned back to our childhood. And so that's 0 to 7. Is that would you say it's the most critical period from your estimation?
That's what I've read, or whether or not it's 0 to 9, but it's when our level of consciousness is being developed and we're taking all of this stuff in, but we don't have consciousness yet.
Right.
We're just still absorbing our environment and what's going on and maybe what happened to us.
That's right. And that's why it's so important, the things like defining it and understanding it, because once we've done that, and again, we're talking about courage specifically, once we've done that, then we can look back and say, okay, so let's challenge my beliefs or my upbringings or my thoughts or whatever was put inside me at that point, and that helps you challenge and really be honest with yourself.
Well, there's a real
a lot of work to it, though. It's not easy, but it's right. That's a process.
Yeah, being honest with myself. Okay, honest do I have to be?
Yeah.
But before your time comes to pass on, trust me, you want to be honest. You want to have a pure heart. You want your spirit to be in a good place when you transition.
Yeah. And you've mentioned a couple of times, Sandra, and I love the term, the reservoir of courage.
Yes.
I think that that speaks volumes in terms of what it can do for us, because it's this, this thing that you can draw back on. And I think I was talking earlier about just having those milestones that you can build on. It's the same thing. I wonder if you could talk about how significant of having a reservoir of courage is.
Well, it's significant because when you recognize that you can say, "Oh, my reservoir is kind of low. I didn't speak up in that. I didn't speak up in that staff meeting, or I've been withholding a." When is a perfect time to have this perfect conversation with this person? Like, is the mood right now? Is it, is this the time? And, you know, once again, the suffering of the chatter that goes on, to make sure, okay, could this be the perfect time? And I'll have this conversation. Well, if you have the linguistic skills and you can posture it in a way to say, this takes a lot of courage for me to share this with you.
Right.
I've mustered my courage to have a conversation with you. Would you be receptive to that?
With powerful words. Those are powerful words, because like I said before, it helps that connection, and I think people can relate to that type of language.
Yeah, because so the reservoir, to go back to what you asked, the reservoir, if it's low, you understand that it's low. If it's full, you come home, you look in the mirror and you go, yes, I feel good about myself. Otherwise, you come home and you say, okay, beat yourself up. Why didn't I speak up and say this? Why didn't I say that? And that just creates suffering.
Right.
So one of the things that your listeners can do is to jot down this. I like the word you use, the stepping stones, the milestones. Those are all words that I use in their life. And just little snippets of things, and look to see, what they mean. Are they about standing in their self-esteem? Are they about standing in their faith? Are they about taking risks? Are they about speaking up? I call this my courage portrait, which we don't have time to go through, but the courage portrait would reveal where you're weighted and where you're blind, just to the 12 behaviors of courage.
Wow. So 12 behaviors. Okay.
Yeah, that's my research. That's on my website, actually, the source wheel diagram.
So and that would be a good point to reference point to send listeners to check out to explore further the 12 behaviors, because I think now do people have to exhibit all 12, or there's some of them, or how does that work?
Whatever their stepping stones are, there's no right or wrong or whatever.
Okay.
So, for example, this coaching client that I currently have, she's very weighted in confidence or self-esteem.
Mm-hmm.
She has nothing in vulnerability, and her issue is vulnerability. Hey, what a surprise.
Mm-hmm.
Her whole image is attached to being strong and capable, and I can do this, and I drive a big pickup, and blah blah blah.
And I guess it would vary amongst, because we're all different. It varies across the board, right? Or there's some common ones.
Exactly. It's our own personal journey.
Wow.
Yeah. There's no one size courage fits all. No.
Got you.
No one size courage fits all.
There you go.
And we see a lot. Just to know, I'm going to interrupt you. We see we see a lot of lower levels of courage consciousness.
Okay.
We see a lot. So what would be an example? So Audrey, you're going to ask me, so what would be an example of a higher level of courage?
Right. You got me figured out, Sandra.
And that would be where courage meets grace. Where courage meets grace. So if we had a list of virtues coming up on the screen, you would let me go back. Now you're kind of frozen. Are you all right?
Yeah, actually, let's see. There we go. We're good now.
Okay. So when I'm teaching this, and when I used to teach a lot at DU,
mm-hmm.
I would say, okay, opportunity to be a jerk. How many of you all were raised with learning some virtues? Everybody raises their hand. I said, okay, shout out. What are they? Integrity and honesty. It's the same thing every time. It just blows me out. It's research. How come it's the same thing every time? Integrity and honesty. And I'll say, so how many of you were raised with consistently hearing the word courage?
Right. Not many.
None.
Wow.
None.
Wow. That says a lot.
So one of the things is start saying the word. Just, I mean, a simple tip, just start saying the word. Today I mustered my courage to I made the phone call to blah, blah, blah. Why not? How do you know when you're getting old, whether you respond with why not or why bother? Why not?
Right.
Keep that reservoir of courage high.
Yeah, no. Well, and it's interesting because when you acknowledge the courage, you're also sort of making yourself a bit vulnerable, right? You're openly saying, I don't necessarily have all the courage. I had to muster it up or I had to build it up. And so it's a little bit of vulnerability you're doing, is it not, Sandra?
Yes, and beautiful. I mean, there's nothing like the bedrock of vulnerability. I mean, I'll say that, this requires a lot of vulnerability for me. I speak the language. So, people just look at me like, wow, when I feel vulnerable, then I say it. I put the cards on the table.
Yes. Yeah, that's what it is. That's what it is. And it's the courage to put the cards on the table, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Oh, amazing. What in what 26 years, 3 books of research, all this research and work that you've done, has anything changed with courage over the years, or has it always been consistently the same?
Actually, what happens is a validation that what surfaced is true. Right. It hasn't been skewed in any kind of way. Like I mentioned before, over the last 5 years, what raised his head was, wow, speaking up is really a big deal for people. I have the opportunity to work with some pretty sophisticated people, and they'll say, well, Sandra, I just don't know really what to say, because they don't have those linguistic skills.
Right.
So any of your listeners want the article, The Language of Courage, I'm happy they can email me, or probably it's Google. But, if you look at one of the most quintessential examples of courage, would be a whistleblower.
Okay.
I mean, they really put themselves at risk and stand alone.
Right.
Now we don't punish them as much. Now we reward, particularly in the financial world, all the fraud.
Right.
We reward them for exposing what's going on. So
interesting.
Yeah. I'm looking at my notes. I wanted to read to you this. I just found this Vincent van Gogh quote that says, okay, what would life be if we had no courage to attempt anything? What would life be if we had no courage to attempt anything?
That's a powerful question, Sandra, because even on this podcast, we sort of talk a lot about being audacious and being bold, and very similar on that lines of, if you don't take bold risks or you don't be audacious and try new things, where would you be? What would we accomplish? And the piece around this that we spend a lot of time talking about is the impact that we can now have on other people. So you can inspire people by being courageous, right? By taking that chance or taking that risk, you can inspire people and maybe even show them that they too can do the same in wherever situation that they're in. So it's a fantastic question.
What we affirm in ourselves, we affirm in others. So if you're going to encourage, courage, I'm going to go back. I just realized that I kind of didn't nail my thought about the list of virtues, where courage meets grace. So on that list of virtues, grace would be on there. How many people have you met that leave an indelible mark on your heart? You never forget them. You always remember how they touch you. Usually it's something very small, something maybe they wrote to encourage you.
Yes.
And that is grace. And so a higher integral level of courage consciousness is where courage meets grace. I have met very few people who have that finesse.
Right.
In my contaminated reality, I have it.
I like that, your contaminated reality. Oh, wow. Sad.
Don't tell anybody.
I won't say a word. Let them figure it out on their own. How's that?
Okay.
Oh my, Sandra, this has just been a delightful conversation, and I've so appreciated you taking the time and imparting some of your own research and knowledge and learnings for our listeners. Even for myself, I'm walking away with some understandings and that but I think we're always there, but you just had to open them up a little bit for me. So I want to thank you for doing that. Really much appreciated. If our listeners wanted to connect with you or learn more about your work, where can we send them, Sandra?
Well, if you're asking about my website, it's just my name, which most people don't get. So it's just Sandra Walston, WALSTON.com. So that's where they can reach out, or my email address is sandra@sandrawalston.com. So I'm on, Twitter and LinkedIn and Facebook Biz and all that stuff. But I just want to tell you, I have really looked forward to connecting with you. I love the couple of videos that I saw before. You do a heartwarming job.
Oh,
get that?
Thank you. Yes,
heartwarming job, which means you spend your courage. And thank you for mustering your courage to do these podcasts and for having me on.
Oh, I appreciate it. Sandra, I get as much as I enjoy. I get so much out of it for myself. I truly do. And it's inspiring, it's encouraging. In a lot of instances, it's validating. And that what keeps, and that's those things that keep me going. So thank you for sharing your time.
Thank you.
Greetings, salutations, and welcome back to the podcast. Big shout out and thanks to Sandra for being here and leaving us with your great knowledge, sharing a great knowledge with us. You've got a wealth of insights on what courage is, and I thank you for all your hard work, and I thank you for the time and really important message of hope and encouragement. Sandra left us with so much to think about. But I think if I think back to the conversation, if there's one thing I could take away from it, it would be this. There's always going to be some form of chatter in our heads telling us to be afraid or not take action or to doubt ourselves. Our job is to move past that chatter and not let it hold us back. One of those ways is to use past successes as stepping stones. And by doing so, we can help build up our reservoir of courage. Those stepping stones, those markers, those milestones, if used correctly, can set us up for future jumps or future leaps that we plan on taking as we continue to move ahead. Hey, listen, I really appreciate our listeners for spending some time and sharing it here with us on the podcast. If you haven't registered for email notifications, you can do so by heading over to bestaudaciouslife.com, enter in your email address, and you'll be immediately alerted every time there's new content that comes out. So I'd encourage you to do so as a great way to stay connected. I really appreciate our listeners, as I say every single episode, appreciative of the time, support that you've given. Without you, we wouldn't be where we are today. So again, I say thank you and extend my appreciation as I always do. We've reached the end of another episode. So until next time, stay safe, be kind, show love to one another, and be audacious.
You've been listening to the Audacious Living Podcast, hosted by Audley Stevenson. If you enjoyed what you heard, be sure to like, subscribe, and share. Until next time, be audacious.